All right, and we're back. Cool. So today I'm joined by someone who has shaped the sports nutrition and performance industry at the highest level. Eric Hillman is the co-founder of Europa Sports, which grew into the largest distributor of sports nutrition products in the United States, representing hundreds, maybe thousands of brands, and redefining how supplements reached athletes and consumers. He later stepped in as CEO of Muscle Farm, guiding one of the most iconic names in the space through a critical chapter of its journey and one of my personal favorite whey protein supplements. But Eric's journey goes far beyond boardrooms and brand strategy. He's been a gym owner, a strength and size coach at the collegiate level, and an IFBB and NPC judge, as well as a trusted advisor to athletes, entrepreneurs, and organizations worldwide. His career is a rare blend of entrepreneurship, leadership, and hands on experience in the trenches of performance. So today we're going to dive into the lessons he's learned building and scaling companies, the evolution of sports nutrition, and what it really takes to create a brand and a culture that lasts. Eric, it's truly an honor to have you on here. Thanks for coming on today.
Yeah, Mike, thanks for having me here. It's awesome. Thank you.
So before this, we were just kind of launching into what you thought about, Europa Sports and you starting it and the whole supplement distribution space. Do you want to kind of take it away from there? What we were touching upon before this.
Yeah, so in 19, well, I mean, I started my career when I graduated college in 1983. I moved to Charlotte to work for an airline. 2 months later, I was transferred by that airline to Winston-Salem, North Carolina, where I bought into my first gym, and that's where I was introduced to supplements. US Air merges with Piedmont, and they go, Eric, we want you to move to Pittsburgh. And I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not moving to Pittsburgh. So in my gym, I was selling a brand called the Vitamin Locker. Now, you got to remember, in 1984, there was probably only 6 brands of supplements in existence. There weren't any. Weeder was a brand, uh, Nature's Best, Beverly International, but there was only maybe 3 or 4 other brands. And this one was a local brand out of Charlotte, North Carolina, and it was a buddy of mine. I carried his supplements in my gym. And when the company merged, they the guy who owned Vitamin Locker said, "Hey man, would you come down and be a 5% partner and help me sell this brand?" So I decided to do that. I moved to Charlotte, where I met my current business partner, Jeff Compton. He had also was brought on. We worked for the Vitamin Locker for maybe a year and a half, 2 years. Things kind of to go a little bit sour there. That's got its own history. Jeff and I then started to work for a manufacturer in Jonesboro, Georgia called Vitalabs. Well, Vitalabs is where I learned more about pricing and the cost of manufactured goods. But we were still working out of my living room. Jeff and I were roommates. We were working out of my living room. And I told Jeff, I said, "Hey man, more supplements were coming into the market now, and a lot of the gym owners that I dealt with, and my business partner Jeff was a competitive bodybuilder, and by that time now I'm a NPC national judge. But most of the guys I judged owned gyms, so we had a great little relationship. I don't know if they bought from me because they liked me or they thought I'd judge them better at a show. I didn't care, right? So I'm telling Jeff, it's like, you know what, man, I think I want to start a distribution company, and start to pick up all these brands. And Jeff's going, man, look, I don't really know. He was contemplating going back to college to get his law degree, and I'm like, no, you will suck as a lawyer, man. You really need to come with me. So fortunately, Jeff came with me, and this was in November of '89, and we didn't know what we were going to call it. He wanted to call it Eric and Jeff's Distributing. So Lee Haney and I go to Athens, Greece to do a seminar. And I train at this place called Europa Gym. And I've never heard that term Europa before. And I asked the guy that owned it in Athens, I said, man, what does Europa mean? He goes, it means all of Europe. And at the time, a lot of the supplements coming into the United States were from Europe. And we had a distributor in Athens that said, hey, if you guys want to do this, I'll help fund it. So I'm flying back, and I get back and I walk into Jeff. I said, hey, man, I think I'm going to call it Europa Sports. And he goes, cool. So that's where the name spawned from. But we only had Fighter Labs. That was it. So we had to go out and we had to pick up brands like Twin Labs and Champion. They were coming along. Um, and but because I was a judge and Jeff and I heavily invested in the gym market, um, that's where the industry grew. You got to remember, in pre-90s, there was no internet, there was no bodybuilding.com, there was no amazon.com. There really wasn't. The only place that were competitive to sports supplements was GNC. And GNC didn't really carry sports supplements because there weren't any out there. And you couldn't supply the GNCs. So we, because I was at that point now a powerhouse gym owner, um, I always talked about incremental revenue. And in the summertime, when your memberships kind of wean off a little bit because kids are out of school, your supplement sales were always continuing. So it always gave the gym owner an incremental revenue to be able to keep going and keep some revenue coming in. But you got to remember, it was fat burners, amino acids, super sterile complexes. BCAAs were really big in the 80s. But it allowed them to keep revenue coming in, and that really did build our business. But because I was into judging and Jeff was into bodybuilding, we were always trying to find the new supplements coming out. And we became the avenue for supplements to get into the marketplace. But because now I've become an IFBB judge, more of these supplement companies want these pro bodybuilders. So now I'm linking up pro bodybuilders with supplement companies. Pro bodybuilders are making money. They're influencing people in their territories. Still, you got to remember, this is still real early in the internet world. No influencers at the time. Everything was done by Muscle and Fitness and Flex magazine, muscular development. But now all these pro bodybuilders are now getting contracts with these supplement companies, and the whole industry is just starting to explode. And and to this day, I'll tell people, I think the bodybuilding world expanded because now you had supplement companies helping provide revenue for these athletes. And look, it was that time period when size was everything. It was about being big. It was about being, people were in the gym, aerobics classes. I had a 3,000 square foot aerobics floor that was packed every class. That all brought people in. And if you look pre-90s, hotels didn't have gyms. Now most people don't stay in a hotel unless they have a gym. So the whole influence of supplements in the bodybuilding is really what was fun about Europa, and we just grew like mad. The problem with you have when you're big is in COVID hits, and we couldn't defer people fast enough. We had so much overhead, and then what happened? Gyms closed. Gyms didn't couldn't pay us because they were closed. The bigger retailers that owed us couldn't pay us. You had places like GNC filing bankruptcy, so nobody was getting paid. But because we weren't getting paid, we couldn't pay the vendors. Vendors stopped shipping to us and started shipping direct. I mean, it was, the being the biggest is sometimes great because we made a lot of companies very successful. But at the end, it was really our downfall, being that big. Some of the smaller distributors who are very successful today didn't have the overhead and were able to make it through COVID. And then the manufacturers then set them up, which allowed them to grow. And it's like somebody said, a restaurant probably closed during COVID, but a new one just opened up. So we didn't lose a restaurant. We just lost the owner who invested all of his money or life into the first restaurant, just helped the second one out. But that's all part of being an entrepreneur. You gotta ride the ship and you gotta sink with the ship. So, but Europa now has moved more into they've gotten out of distribution. What COVID did is it educated the manufacturers how to deal direct with the end consumer, because now they can sell direct to the end consumer, because the end consumer didn't have retail to go to. But now the retail that is open is now a direct relationship. And on most part, except for drinks and maybe bars, it's bad for the distributors because Now they have direct relationships with the manufacturers. So Europa has moved into more 3PL where they do shipping for a lot of the larger manufacturers, and they've gotten completely out of distribution. But with that background, when Muscle Farm was going through its rough patches, the CEO at that time, Ryan Drexler, had called and said, "Hey, E, can you come in and help me with sales? Can you kind of help me run this?" He wanted to move up to a more of a chairman of the board position with Muscle Farm. And I went, yeah, yeah. I mean, I'd love to. So I came on board, and then within 3 months, we filed bankruptcy. Um, Ryan Drexler moved off the board. They moved me as full CEO and on the board of directors. But being full CEO, I was allowed to come back in. And we even talked earlier that you love combat, but it was just expensive, and you bought it at Costco. And then COVID knocked Costco off the chart, right? So you couldn't get it at Costco. Muscle Farm was never great at selling to the direct consumer because they always wanted to support their retail system. And because they wanted to support the retail system, when COVID hit, there was no retail for them to get their product to. And it was just the domino fact of COVID. So they went through some troubles, filed bankruptcy. They asked me to come in and help guide it through the bankruptcy. Fortunately, through the bankruptcy, or because of the bankruptcy, Muscle Farm went through a period uh, where it was said that their protein contained nitrogen and amino acids, and they were spiking. And when I came back in, I said, "Look, I won't touch a product unless it's certified," and it's always been certified with Informed Choice. So we went back to Informed Choice and I'm talking to Andy and Paul at Informed Choice, and they're going, "Look, Eric, we had this new thing called Informed Protein, and that measures your levels of protein, and people who take this are assured they're getting what they buy." So we stuck both of those labels on this protein, and you know what? We did very well. Um, we were just trying to stay above the water, and not sink during this bankruptcy. We hope to get it sold. Um, but the brand did make a small comeback. I was able to launch some of the older um, supplements that Muscle Farm was known for. We redid the collagen, we redid the creatine, not collagen, whey protein. We redid the creatine. We launched EAAs. We relaunched our BCAAs, um, and we did that all under Informed Choice. So it was nice to be able to transition from what I was able to do business wise at Europa, even though that couldn't sustain Jeff and I staying on board to run it through the end, but at least coming in and being able to help you, Muscle Farm get to a sale. And now it's owned by Fit Life Brands and it's existing.
Yeah, that's wild. Is there, well, like with respect to Muscle Farm, so you said like it's still very much rolling. It's just like
Yeah.
not as hot as it was. And we had talked before about how one of the main initiatives that you had was switching from like the giant jugs down to the bags just to reduce the overhead cost and you can like ship out more bags. Is that something that can also be seen with respect to EAAs, BCAAs, creatine, even though you're buying that in a smaller quantity as a, in comparison with whey protein or casein protein?
Yeah. So I'm going to say 15 or 20 years ago, Joe Fortunato, who was the CEO of GNC, and I were talking about getting rid of these plastic jugs. It was in the time when the plastic awareness was really starting to peak. And and I laugh and tell people, look, I'm that half pregnant guy because I do recycle, but I drive a Hummer. So but I just believe that the plastics were just getting out of hand because we were going through so much protein so fast and just throwing these jugs away. And I'm like, okay, if I look at the cost stance of plastic versus bags, um, I can do a 10-pound jug of protein with cap or with lid, with label, with liner, with safety seal, 350. A bag was 57 cents, right? Revenue wise for a manufacturer and the way that protein was starting to spike in cost, it was a no brainer for me. And it allowed me to move more into an initiative of go green. But Muscle Farms colors are black and 375 seed green Pantone color. So we did an initiative, go Muscle Farm 375 seed green. I did link up with Perfect Shaker Darren, who owns Perfect Shaker, gave me the name of a guy who reclaims ocean plastic. And all the Muscle Farm Shaker cups now are reclaimed plastic. So, it's nice that they didn't go back to the regular plastic. Not sure if they will do that, but we did take creatine and put it in a bag. The BCAAs are in a bag, EAAs are in a bag. I'm not really sure if the new company will stay with bags. I think retailers have a little bit harder time stacking bags. That's the reason Joe Fortunato and I had a tough time selling it back 15, 20 years ago. But yeah, it's very easy. As a matter of fact, I'd take Combat Creatine now in the Ziploc bag. It's so easy to deal with. And you know what? I can throw the bag. I don't have a big clumpy bottle in my gym bag. I can just leave the bag out. It's so much nicer for me to be able to do it.
I do that same thing with like the bags of protein when I'm like going away on travel. And instead of like having like this enormous bottle with me or buying something when I'm there, I literally just roll it up and put it in my bag. And it's like, cool. Now I have like a week or two's worth of whey protein just in a bag, like in my backpack. And I have a shaker bottle in the side. It's the easiest thing.
Well, you know what? It's great if it's a chocolate protein powder, but when it's creatine and it's a bag that big, oh my God! My bags always get pulled out through TSA. Always the little tiny creatine bag. But I take, because I'm in the middle of sarcopenia, where, and I laugh. I told you earlier, I think it's God's little joke on aging males. Why are you taking my muscle tissue away now? Now is when I really want to keep it, but now I'm having to do things excessively, not to try to grow muscle, because it's become harder as I've gotten older to grow muscle. It's keeping that muscle. So I'm now taking 10 grams of creatine twice a day. They always say take 5 grams. I've taken 10 grams for probably 6, 7 years now. Seems to work a lot better. My focus is so much better since I've really upped my creatine. But because I'm trying to battle sarcopenia, I'm trying whatever I can, and I'm on TRT. That's the other blessing of being old, is I don't ever, I can do it legally and not really get in trouble for it. I don't want to be my dad, who was small and let himself just lose all of his muscle, because my dad never really worked out. But I don't want to be that. I still own a powerhouse gym. I still want to be relevant. I'm still on my church's I lead my church's security team, and I want people to say, "Man, if I mess with him, there might be a chance I'm not going to win." But I don't do excessive drugs. I don't take things that I probably did in my 20s and 30s to maintain 300 pounds. But I'm being a lot smarter about the foods I eat, the way I eat it, and the supplements I take, because it's just become a lot harder. And just making sure that, look, I'm a 2.5 grams per pound on protein guy. And that's what, when I recommend to people, when I recommend it to the athletes, and sports nutritionists tell me I'm going to kill these athletes by having them at 2.5. But fortunately, with the ISSN and Jose Antonio and our good friends, and he doesn't like that I go that high of protein. He just says it's a waste. But I've seen it work a lot different in my 40 years on athletes. That this high level of protein seems to grow, or at least help guys grow. And it's not much about growing. It's about allowing them to recuperate so they can grow. And I've seen it in action. And I've got multiple bodybuilders. Phil Kogan, who hosts a show called The Amazing Race, he rode the 1927 Tour de France on a 1927 bike. And the only thing he changed was the brakes and the seat. But we did a whole supplement program for him in the 200 miles a day, and I can't remember how many days that he did it in. And he rode the exact same route that they'd ride every day in the 1927 Tour de France. He only cramped one day, and it's because he didn't do his protocol for that day. Every other day, he took the protocol that I set up for him on the protein, the rehydration, never cramped one day that he didn't take anything, cramp, and Back on the next day, didn't cramp, didn't have any issues, repaired for the next day's morning ride. Just doesn't work with football players. It works with endurance athletes. Um, I will tell you, I did a Tough Mudder 8, 9 years ago. The only thing I learned after that Tough Mudder is I didn't take enough EAAs after. Man, I was so sore after. I took a lot of protein prior, but I didn't take them after. And then when I did a when I got ready, I never did the second one. When I got ready for it, I kept on my EAAs, and I never had issues. So I do know that after I did that Tough Mudder, because I didn't load heavy enough on my EAAs after, I think that's why I couldn't walk for a week. I mean, it was tough. I couldn't, my muscles hurt. Everything was sore because I had no recuperate. I burned out all my excessive protein prior to that race, and I had nothing to refuel when it was over.
Did you ever, for the example of the guy who was riding his bike 200 miles a day, did you have him doing a combination of EAAs and BCAAs while on the ride? And then like,
Yeah.
breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, he was eating like more whole foods and even more shakes, because shakes can be, I guess, like a little bit harder on your stomach when you're in the mix, but getting the EAAs in has a lot of support behind it to just decrease muscle protein breakdown and just keep the synthesis high throughout the day.
Yeah, so it's really hard when you're riding 200 miles a day to get food. So I mean, you can't ride fast enough. And when you're talking about riding up, mountain like on a curve like this, most of it was done with gels, goos. He did get a chance to eat. Almost all of his meals were protein. Did have shakes. Most of the shakes were morning and when he went to bed. The heavier protein shakes, and really the heavier protein shake at bedtime was so when he hit that REM sleep and that growth hormone release, he was able to have protein during those key periods of time to help him when he got up at 5 a.m. to get back on that bike at 6. So yeah, we kind of loaded them down with more, and I'm going to say water based, the EAAs, the BCAAs, the hydration. We used a lot of Cytomax, and I mean, most people don't realize Cytomax almost single handedly is what stopped it. You're way too young to remember, but when I used to watch the Olympics and they were doing the marathons and they were coming over at the last 24 miles, they could barely make it. Right? They were just getting over. Now people run 25 miles and then go run 25 miles more after a 25-mile race. Cytomax, because it wasn't um, a thirst quencher like the drinks that were out there prior to it, it really was a hydration, and it knew how to use maltodextrin better than most other of the hydration drinks. Cytomax was one of those very first, and when runners started to get a hold of Cytomax, it changed their whole um, uh, uh, endurance experience. So they could, like I said, I mean, I know guys who go run 50-mile marathons now, and like, yeah, I get kind
Is
of cramped in a car.
is Cytomax still around?
So Pepsi bought it. Gatorade owns it. Muscle Milk is still around. I don't think Cytomax is still around.
Because I had bought Cytomax back in 2013, my first year when I was training for marathons in college. I saw that guy Ryan Hall drinking Cytomax and like Meb Kavleski drinking Cytomax back in like 2010, and I was like, I got to get this stuff. So I got myself a
Yeah,
bottle when I started running marathons, and I had it, and then I just kind of tailed off as I became more of an exercise science student and learning what I needed. But yeah, it's crazy now because I was in the ultra marathoning field for a while doing like 50 milers, 100 milers, 24-hour races. And I would just pound the electrolytes, pound the protein shakes, like at like some of the aid stations. And I was flexing my way through the finish line of a 50-mile race. And my like one claim to fame was the day after a 100K ultra marathon, I deadlifted 405 for 4 sets of 6 without a belt on. And I only weighed 145 pounds. And I was like, how is this possible? And I was eating 235 grams of protein a day. I was eating 4,000 calories, tons of fruits and veggies. And I was like, holy crap. Like, and I was like 26 years old. And I was like, man, I feel like superhuman right now. But there must be something to the weight training and the protein.
I, and that's the thing where most people, they never make that connection. And because you made that connection, you understand how protein works with the muscles. Most most athletes, and I've worked with a lot of NFL athletes and guys who are 300 pounds, they would rather go eat pizzas to stay 300 pounds than eat chicken breast or lean steak or anything protein wise. And I'm like, guys, it's two whole separate things. I mean, I put 27 pounds on a guy who wanted to get back into the NFL. He retired, lost all this weight. We put 27 pounds on him in about 35 days, and it
Ooh.
freaked him out so bad. But his skeletal muscle, his skeletal body fat didn't go up a percent. His muscle tissue just exploded. All he was drinking a lot of shakes. Now the problem with a lot of shakes, it's not as much gut issues. It's just how thick it makes your stools coming out. I mean that's really the bad side effect of a lot of heavy protein. But muscle wise, it's just incredible what it does muscle wise. And the sad part is, and Jose and I have had this conversation in the earlier years, we actually did a study with, I'd gotten some protein powder from Optimum Nutrition and and I got some maltodextrin from the Costello brothers who used to own Optimum, and we sent it to Doc, and he did some research studies on starving kids. Is protein better than carbs? And they gave a field of study to protein, but when kids don't exercise, there was no difference. There was no difference. The hardest problem about doing a protein study on muscle is somebody's got to be willing to let you take a biopsy of protein at least once a week out of their thigh. And I'm not really sure you're going to find even people who are desperate for money. And it's not just a 18 gauge needle that's got to pull biopsy tissue out. And that's the biggest reason why I believe we don't have long-term studies on what protein does to muscle. Now we can now start doing a little bit with the DEXA scans and some of the other stuff, but to get a true understanding of how protein works on muscle, if we can't do a scientific study, we have to do on the job training and we have to trial by experience. And fortunately, they've already proven that high levels of protein don't adversely affect liver or kidney function. So, yeah, I would always worry about health first. And, but but every individual I've ever put on high levels of protein, it's worked.
And do you
And I'm
think
not just
that,
talking about for bodybuilders. Yeah, I'm talking about for even the endurance athletes, for the ultra marathoners. Yeah, it's great.
so do you think that, and it's funny, there's a lot of research to suggest that aging individuals who are battling sarcopenia need elevated amounts of protein, but typically they're resistant to that because if people are quote unquote older right now, like they don't come from a generation where health and human performance was really at the forefront and going to the gym was the forefront, and drinking proteins the forefront. So that's number one, is the limiting belief. But then they also, complain that, oh, I don't really have an appetite after I have protein. And what we know is that protein isn't readily converted into fat tissue or adipose tissue. So it's not really going to make you more overweight or obese. And it also is going to increase your metabolic rate. So it's going to make you want to move around more. So if you're just getting like a little boost of energy, you're not going to be putting on body fat. You're going to maintain and or add skeletal muscle mass. What's the issue with it? And it's funny because like there are some doctors who are on board with giving some older folks like an Ensure protein drink, which is this big and not a ton of protein, but it's still on board with the idea of protein. Like, how would you approach someone who's sedentary and in their 60s and 70s? Like, how would you slowly ramp them up to be like, hey, like we're going to ramp you up to a certain amount so that you can increase your vigor, increase your quality of life and your confidence and not deal with falls?
So I'm going to tell you, my mom is 92. She was the Ensure drinkers, right? So I told my mom, I said, look, mom, and this was when she was 90. I said, I need you to drink a muscle milk a day, right? One of the little 20-gram muscle milks. I need you to drink one a day, right? And my mom was having injuries, and she was having shoulder injuries, and her knee was hurting. I said, Mom, I just need you to go on a little bit higher protein. So I bought her a muscle milk. She drank it, loved the flavor. I mean, just absolutely loved the flavor. She drinks two a day now. My mom is so active now at 92, more than she was active from 87 to 90. And my mom's just like what you said. She goes, I'm just not hungry. And aging individuals do eat less. Oddly, my oldest daughter is getting married in a week, and that she wanted me in this sport cut suit with skinny jeans, and the guy's going, the guy who fitted me in this suit goes, "Hey E, you can't gain any more weight." I went, "Bro, I own a gym. If I can't lose weight," but I've lost 13 pounds in about 9, 10 days. But I have an in body. But my in body from June 6th until last week, I've gone up 3 pounds in muscle tissue, and I've lost 6 pounds, 7 pounds in body fat. But I'm losing, I'm just trading off. I don't know how much more I'm losing, but the reason I'm losing weight is because I'm caloric deficient. My muscle I'm maintaining muscle. I'm actually growing muscle because I'm protein rich, but I'm caloric deficient, so I'm losing weight, which is what I want to be. But my problem is because I want to try to maintain some weight, this little time period of losing weight, I don't know how easy it's going to be for me to get back to 233 now that I've lost this 13 pounds, because I was 243 a year ago. Now I was 233 before I started trying to stay in these pants. And I don't know how easy it's going to be for me at with sarcopenia to get the weight back up. Don't know if I want to carry 233 pounds anymore, but not really sure I want to weigh 213 pounds. And
Are you doing like the 575 grams of protein or something like that?
yeah, yeah, I'm still I am, and look, the nice part about it is because I have a truckload of Muscle Farm protein powder, and I have a truckload of RTDs. Protein, I am not deficient in. I have it all over everywhere. It's my calories. But to get an aging individual, they just have to try it, right? Now, look, Ensure didn't taste very well. A lot of if it's not a higher protein, it's usually a thinner base and more liquid. And in the supplement world, I've always said solution is dilution is pollution. And the more liquid you have over your ingredient, it just becomes too thin and has zero taste. The muscle milks and if you ever get a chance to try the Muscle Farm Combat RTD, the chocolate and the salted caramel are phenomenal. I mean, they're phenomenal. As a matter of fact, the guy who owned Muscle Milk is the guy who now owns a flavor company, and he's the guy who flavored. I hate to give that secret out, but he's the best flavor guy. I mean, have you drank Muscle Milk like earlier? It Muscle Milk was a great tasting drink.
I had it back in eighth grade, back in,
Yeah,
I don't know, like 2007, 2008. That was the first ever protein shake.
yeah,
And then I got into like, I think Muscle Farm may have been the second, and I love the Muscle Farm chocolate milk flavor. But yeah, like Muscle Milk was the OG. That was always there.
yeah. Well, and if you can get people to at least, it's like I told people with COVID. COVID released a group of people that I termed active athletes. If you remember, CDC was telling everybody, you got to get out and walk, got to get out and walk. So everybody got out and walked, but they didn't know what to do next. They didn't know, there was no website that said, hey, you walkers, now every 60 seconds, find a curb and do step ups on a curb, right? All they ever did was walk, and they were just active athletes. If somebody could just get to these active athletes and say, up your protein, lower those carbs, increase those good fats, um, you'll drop some of this body weight. You'll become more healthy. Your muscles will become healthier. And I've always believed this, right? And I'm not even sure that I'm right. But when you ever hear somebody said, "Oh, my mom fell and broke her hip," no, I think her hip broke and she fell. I think because they're not taking enough protein in, the bones get more brittle, they break and they fall. But everything I've ever heard was, oh, she fell and broke her hip. I personally think it was broken before she fell, and that's which made them fall, because it's mostly elderly individuals that just seem to fall. They're not tripping; they're just falling. And but I do believe that protein strengthens the bone base, and It strengthens the muscle around the bone. It makes it stronger. And if they could just understand, look, I may be 65, but I started my high protein earlier in life, but I started my excessive protein when I started noticing that I was starting to get a little curvature of the back. I was starting to get, I tell people now, I know I'm getting younger because I'm lifting the same weight now as I did when I was 14 years old. So it means I'm getting younger, right? I mean, it's like, but I'm not as strong as I used to be. I can't lift the weight that I did. Um, and I know that I know that it's aging, but if I can't lift the weight, then I can't build the muscle because just taking protein is not going to build the muscle. I still have to put strenuous exercise on tension on that muscle. And if I'm not taking protein, then I'm not recuperating. I become catabolic, not anabolic. And I just believe that if you don't have amino acids in that blood-brain barrier, you're catabolic. And my goal is to always have available amino acids to be able to grab so my body can try to recuperate itself.
Did you ever do you drink BCAAs and EAAs? Because I know like BCAAs for a while were like not a thing, and maybe they're coming back. Like, how do you feel about that? Because like you're on the supplement side of
Yeah,
things.
so BCAAs were the bomb. I mean,
Yeah.
back in the 80s, that's what we had. We had BCAAs and we had amino acids and we had egg protein. Um, BCAAs were in capsules. Whey protein hits around 92, 93. Everybody jumps on the bandwagon of whey protein and they leave BCAAs in the dust. BCAAs, probably for 15, 20 years, you couldn't sell them. Nobody was buying them because everybody was buying Metrex. They were buying Myoplex. They were buying Ultramet. They were buying everything and Designer Whey. Everybody was buying the whey protein and they forgot about BCAAs. But then BCAAs start to make a little bit of comeback because now we're actually taking less protein than we did in the 80s and 90s. And I used to go through a 2 pound jug of protein in about 7 days. It's still, even though I do high levels of protein, I don't go through protein as fast because I'm not as big and I'm not as heavy, and my protein requirements are down. And but then all of a sudden, EAAs became a big deal for after training. I'm a believer that insulin spike happens with protein, carbs, or fats, and if I have to take one of the three, I'm going to do protein. So I will do a protein shake right after. But like I said, for that Tough Mudder, I didn't take enough EAAs after. I had no repair going. I just do believe that EAAs are extremely effective. After my workout, I really don't even add water. I just take the scoop out and I just pound it. The flavor's not bad. I mean, so it's not a bitter flavor. But yeah, I just believe that if you're an athlete trying to repair and keep muscle on, it's just not about the whey protein. You've got to take your essential amino acids. You just have to.
Yeah, they always say it's funny when you brought up the insulin spike. So like protein is what is known as insulinogenic in that when you have protein by itself, it does spike insulin so that you can become anabolic. And then what also spikes insulin is the skeletal muscle pump. So like when you're just walking or essentially lifting weights, like that, like the lifting weights plus the protein you have, and if you want to add a little bit of carbohydrates, that's just like immediately anabolism or immediately muscle protein synthesis.
Yeah.
So it's funny how it kind of got debunked a little while ago. And I was really pumped to hear that you're on like the protein train because you hear a lot of people going, oh, you need a fast digesting carbohydrate source immediately after workout. It's like, no, 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 no. You need the protein before and after to make sure you're not going into severe muscle protein breakdown, seeing as that a lot of people don't want to eat anything. And you would say that with respect to like football players that if they're burning off 3, 4, 5, 6,000 calories a day, and there's some big boys, we don't want you having like just pizza and soda. Like we need you to have like good quality nutrients, especially the protein, because if you hang down in that incredibly catabolic state with a ton of delayed onset muscle soreness, you're not going to want to come back strong for the afternoon session, tomorrow's session, the next day session, and that's what gets you redshirted, or it helps you lose your, it makes you lose your confidence. So it's like you always need to think about the nutrition first. So I love to hear it from like your side of like the business side of things, but also you as like this anecdotal scientist who's worked with thousands of people of like, this is what works. Trust me.
Yeah, I know. And the only credentials I have behind me are ISSN. That's what I have. And I can remember when I was at Appalachian and doing a little bit at Louisville, the NCAA sent a letter out that basically stated, um, if you have anybody that recommends supplements or anything pharmaceutical, they have to have credentials, and CEO is not a credential. And I just laughed. That's why I went and was certified with Jose. Europa always did Europa Universities, which was Jose coming in to where we used to, with Ed Pariso, used to put on these Europa games around the country. But we had Europa Universities where we would bring college kids in to an atmosphere of working out. And Jose would do a day seminar just to teach about, look, you're in a muscle building environment. This is how this applies to what they're doing out on the stage. It worked so well. But it got people understanding, and especially the new sports nutritionists, and even some of the newer, and I'm going to say newer, if they're involved with an ISSN. Because what happens if you're not an ISSN and you're just book learned from 1965? You never apply what you're actually doing. If you're a strength coach and you get your exercise science degree, you're training people. I'm not really sure a lot of these, and I don't really know, so I don't want to condemn them, but I don't really know if they understand what a true athlete needs in order to repair muscle, not to have a healthy diet. That's a part of it. Pretty food is great, but what is essential to their recuperation? Because look, let's face it, D1 athletes, if you're a starting D1 athlete, you better not get hurt because you just cost that team a lot of money, right? Your starting players. I watched the was it the Cardinals game against? They had like six injured players, and every injury was an injury that probably could have been. Most of them were some were muscle strains, muscle pulls, and I'm like, if you got even at that level athlete, if you're not repairing that muscle, it's going to tear. It's going to tear. We had virtually no injuries, none, because the kids were. And I go back to the bodybuilding world. You don't see a lot of bodybuilders who are injured. You do if they tear a bicep and they're doing a 400-pound bicep curl, sure. But for the most part, bodybuilders who eat tons of protein aren't. They're not really hurt. Muscle tears, it just doesn't happen. And they're doing a lot more strenuous exercise than any lineman will ever do, just not consistently over a hour time period.
Do you
Yeah.
think that,
So pro. Yeah.
go on.
Go. No, you're good.
No, I was going to say, like, do you think that it's interesting because are you familiar with the blue zones where people typically live to be over 100 years old?
No.
Yeah,
No.
you would love this. It's like there's like this documentary on Netflix where this guy Dan Buettner, who was like a huge cyclist, was researching people in these blue zones, like people in Greece and Okinawa, Japan, and Loma Linda, California, who have these big pockets of people living to be 100. And there's a ton of research on it, and like what it comes out to be is that if you want to live to 100, you have to be involved with your community, you have to have a sense of purpose, you need to be physically active, but not like necessarily exercising, just more active. And also having more of a Mediterranean style diet with a modest protein intake. And I was like, I feel like everything was rocking and rolling until he said modest protein intake. And I was like, yeah, fruits and veggies are amazing, but like you can't substitute for like someone who's dealing with osteoporosis and sarcopenia, needs a strong immune system, someone who needs skeletal muscle mass and strength. You need to pound in the protein. So I'm excited to see like all of these current and former athletes, like maybe they'll live into their 90s and 100s at 200 pounds because not only do they have a sense of purpose, they're working out hard and they're getting the protein in. So who knows what's going to happen?
Yeah, and we've just tipped the scale of protein. I mean, when you think protein has really only been available to us since '93 at a mass level, the earlier days of the egg protein, the problem with egg, it contains so much sulfur, and if you take a lot of that sulfur in, it comes out. I'm sorry, but I mean, you know, egg farts were like that. And if you walked into a gym in the 80s, it was like, the place just reeks. But it did. But it was the only protein that we truly had that was in a powder form. But what they found out, almost every single one of the egg proteins that were being made in the middle 80, all through the 80s, it was 80% maltodextrin, 20% egg protein, because egg was still expensive back then. Confronted one of the owners of the company that they tested their product, and he goes, "Oh, no, 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 the egg that's in there is 100%." And I'm like, dude, we've been promoting this egg protein, but at the time we were eating a lot of eggs, a lot of beef. We were more involved in the food because there wasn't a supplement um, to restrict to not bring the calories in with the eggs and the beef and to get our protein. Um, Much easier way. The other thing is, and I'm not really sure. I tried to look up some of the studies. I remember this from my earlier days. There are some protein foods that can take up to 8 hours to get into the broken down into an amino acid and become readily available. I'm not really sure if that's still a true number or not. But I know whey protein is accessible in an hour and 20 minutes. So for me, I would rather have a whey protein that's pre-digested, broken down, that I can get into that blood-brain barrier quicker, um, than depending on the food and not even really sure how much protein of that food is actually getting into usable amino acid form. So I'd like to kind of go back, and you may know that you may know what the real answer on that is. I don't remember, but I do remember reading some protein foods can take up to 8 hours to be usable as protein. Um, don't even know if that's a true statement anymore, but I do know that at least with me, the protein powder was faster.
Oh, it's funny. I always ask my students, do any of you drink protein powder? And it's like a lot of the guys do because they're really zoned in on, muscle building and aesthetics and performance. And some of the gals do as well. And for the folks who don't, I say, what do you know about protein powder? What do you think about protein powder? And a lot of them had a very similar conversation that I had had with my mom when I was about 14, 15, and I snuck a big bottle of Optimum Nutrition that I bought at a local vitamin shop. I snuck it into my house and she found it. It was like underneath my bed. She goes, I found this bottle of whey protein. She goes, are you doing drugs? I was like, what? I was like 14. And I always explain to my students that, like, if you were to boil down cow's milk, like on the very top film would be a very fast digesting whey protein of these curds of whey, and on the bottom is a much thicker protein called casein. So as you said, and you know very well, that whey is digested very, very quickly and hits the muscle fast, whereas casein has a much larger area under the curve. So that's why it's great to have, like, before sleep. I always call it anabolic sleep because, like, you have a much larger muscle protein synthetic response, which is amazing. It's not to say that one's better or worse to have at any point of the day. They're both great, or having milk is great. But if you look at, like, the bioavailability scales, like the PDCAAS scale and the biological value scale, like milk, whey, casein, and eggs are the top protein sources that any human being can have. Like beef is good, chicken's good, turkey's good, but everything else falls off from there. And it's like an A, a B, a C, a D grading. But like if you're having milk, whey, casein, eggs, I mean, it's like a 1 to a 1.1 on a 1 point scale for the protein digestibility corrected amino acids. So the bioavailability is through the roof. So I wouldn't be surprised if you and all of your former athletes who are chugging down loads of protein shakes, you're getting the creme de la creme tons of time throughout the day. And if you're not missing any days, you're not missing any weeks or months or years, you're like years ahead of the curve. So
Well,
good
and
things
it's
like
funny
that.
you talk about casein because when I talked about the 3 scoops that I take before I go to bed, it's casein, and the reason why is because of the whey protein being available in an hour and 20 minutes. Casein becomes available in about 3 hours. Well, about 3 hours is when you hit that first REM. I don't really care about the time that I fall asleep until I hit REM. I don't want to waste any of that protein. I want to store as much protein as I can to last me my next 4 REMs because I know that fifth REM has like very little growth hormone release. And when I wake up, I'm going to have no protein in my system. But that's why I do. And I'm glad you said that. I'm a big believer in casein protein. I do way during the day because it's faster in my system. But man, every meal plan that I write, it's casein before you go to bed. And people, I don't think they're like, well, I got to buy two different bottles. It's like, yeah, but if I tell you to take 3 scoops of whey protein, it's still more expensive than 3 scoops of casein. So you're going to want to take the 3 scoops of casein. Yeah, you may spend a little bit more at the store, but I tell people, man, stagger your buying when you buy supplements. Don't try to buy everything at one time because then your bill's going to be $300. But if you know when you're going to run out of stuff, just stagger it. So you're spending $25 a week. Look, in today's world, kids spill $25. I mean, they don't even know how they lose it. They lose $25. And
Yeah.
I talked to a lot of pro golfers. I worked with Octagon a couple of years, helping their golfers. Just knowing with what they took wasn't going to be anything that was bad, and talking to them about what's in their bag during these rounds in the earlier week. It's Snickers bars, it's potato chips, and I'm like, wow. You don't even realize by the time because they're walking, they're not in a golf cart, they're walking. I said, by the time you've reached that 18th hole, do you know how far you've actually walked? And then you're swinging the club, and they get a protein in there the whole time you're doing it, or at least the EAAs. That's what we try to do, the stick packs of EAAs for these guys. Started working with pro bass fishermen. Pro bass fishermen um, in any bass tournament will cast 50,000 times. And when you figure how they
Really?
cast, yeah, 50,000 times. And I'm like, guys, if you're not repairing that tricep, that extension, I said, you're just going to fatigue out. You're not going to be able. And I said, the other thing is we put them on creatine because I really do believe that creatine will be the next memory. I mean, I do think that once they figure out how to get creatine in, I think it will be one of our cures for dementia and Alzheimer's. When I up my levels of creatine and I get everybody else to up their levels, it's amazing the better focus you seem to have. And I really hope there's more studies on it because I think creatine is the most underused supplement of anything for women and for men.
It's funny you say that because when I first got into grad school a few years ago, like we learned about creatine, and it's funny because you see like all these like budding influencers talking about creatine of like, oh, it helps you get that extra rep. And it's like, okay, like you don't really understand the phosphocreatine system and how it works in the first 0 to 10 seconds of performance. But now we're seeing these amazing beneficial physiological adaptations for cognition and the brain's anatomy and physiology, like as we age. And even for people who are sleep deprived, if they have 1 or 2 servings of creatine, are like significantly more focused, smarter, and can regulate their mood and emotion better than someone who didn't take creatine just as sleep deprived. So it's amazing. That's another thing I try to get my parents to take is like creatine. I'm like, this is amazing. And as you said, we do need more studies, not just in performance, but also cognition, because a lot of folks who deal with high blood pressure and central adiposity and metabolic syndrome, that also goes into the brain. They can develop
Mm-hmm.
Alzheimer's, they can develop dementia, and they can just get kind of like, they can have like the sundowning. And it's like, if we can keep you cognitively strong, you can continue working, you can continue giving back and educating. What's not to love? And you continue to build your muscle mass.
Yeah. And just like you said, and the moms are really the ones who put the kibosh on creatine for 15 years. It's because they did one study that, people were dying, but what they were dying from it's funny. It was the guys who were trying to cut body fat. They'd wear the big vinyl suits. They were taking straight ephedrine and creatine. So what the FDA came out and said was creatine, ephedrine will kill you. Didn't talk about the heat and the sweatsuits, but because these athletes were taking creatine, because creatine was just as popular in the earlier days when there was a company called California Body Club that was started by Ed Bird and Anthony Amata. And I think I'm losing you.
All
I
right, you
lost
get
you.
back in. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Cool. We're back in.
yeah. So I don't know where we broke off. Um, but
You were talking about the study with the ephedrine and the creatine.
Well, yeah. So this. Well, it wasn't the study. It was the people who died had in common was creatine and ephedrine. So it must be those two things that killed the people that had died. And it's like, it was 100 degrees outside. They had sweatsuits on. They were taking ephedrine and they weren't hydrated. But that's when moms caught wind that creatine was involved. And, moms really blocked the purchasing of creatine until the last few years, when now they're talking about women taking creatine. And that's gotten extremely popular. My wife, I'm laughing, for the last 15 years, I'm telling my wife, got to take creatine, got to take creatine. She's like, well, I don't want to put muscle on, the same thing most people say. And probably about 9 months ago, we're at our kitchen table and she's watching some podcast and she goes, hey, this guy says I need to start taking creatine. And I'm like, God, you can't coach your own kids. So, but because it was somebody with credentials saying, you, Lori, need to take creatine, then the bell turns on, and now she takes creatine every day. And look, her physical activity is way past mine. She does group fitness, she does rock box, she does, all these boot camp classes. I unfortunately am under the impression no one's ever died in front of a dumbbell rack. So, people, people,
It's the
people.
greatest quote I've ever heard.
Oh my God, man! I mean, I'm okay lifting weights. If I keel over doing a dumbbell curl, I'm good. I told somebody in the gym last week, I said, hey, man, if you find me dead on the bench, add weight and then call 911. I said, just put more weight on there and then dial 911, just so if they come in, the crime scene will show it. But you know what? But now my wife is taking creatine, where before she was in that same influence of the bad creatine. Um, so most people don't realize creatine was really brought out by a company called California Body Club, and it was owned by Ed Bird and Anthony Amata. 2 months later, they turned it into a company called EAS, which was later purchased by a guy named Bill Phillips, who wrote the book Body for Life, and just exploded the awareness. And it's funny, they call creatine phosphagen, not creatine. And I thought it was one of the coolest marketing clicks to get you to buy this creatine, but they were so far ahead of the curve on understanding what creatine did. And if those two guys had not launched it, we wouldn't have creatine today. I don't think our industry would have ever found creatine if it wasn't for Ed Bird and Anthony Amata, those two guys.
Is EAS still
It
doing
is.
protein powders?
No, it's owned by Abbott Pharmaceuticals, and I think they do a 20-gram RTD now. And they killed the brand. They wouldn't sell the brand. They didn't want anybody to come in and rebuy the brand. I know a couple of my buddies have bought the names of stuff like Phosphagain. They let lapse. My buddy bought it. So I think they're picking it apart. But yeah, EAS is still in existence, and I think I don't remember what they call that 20-gram protein anymore. But Abbott owns it. And honestly, the reason that brand died is because North Castle bought it from Bill Phillips, but North Castle didn't buy the bobblehead, didn't buy Bill. And it's just like if there was a brand out there called the Zone Bar, Barry Sears Zone Bar. Well, when I want to say Abbott bought the Zone Bar, they didn't buy Barry Sears. And we're an industry of followers. That's why that we have so many people that we follow on Instagram. We want to see what they're doing and mimic what they do. And when the guy who leads, just like Rich Piana at 5%, when Rich passed away, pretty much so did the brand, as far as Rich was accelerating that brand, because people were following the bobblehead just like they were following Bill. And when Bill moved it over, he stopped talking about it. When he stopped talking about it, the brand dies. And look, we're vanity people. We always want the next thing that's going to make us look younger or more fit, and we just like options. I can remember 20 years ago, you would buy a family of products. If you bought Optimum Nutrition, you bought everything in that brand. Now brands are going more to the hero SKUs and having one. They'll have one influencer that endorses 7 different SKUs, but now this influencer looks like he's not biased because he's saying, oh, no, these are the 7 I picked from all the companies, instead of going, only take Optimum, only take BSN, only take this brand. And because what the influencers found out is I can look less biased if I just sell myself to a certain category. They make more money. The brands now only have hero SKUs instead of brand of full family SKU. So that dynamic has changed in the purchasing world. So when you see most supplement companies coming out now, they're not bringing out a full breadth of products. It's 1 or 2 SKUs now. But when I first started in '83, there were 6 brands. Now there's probably 63,000 brands out there to buy. Everybody, almost anybody can make a brand.
What would you say to someone who has a really great following on social media and they wanted to create their own supplement brand? Would you just tell them, hey, get sponsored as opposed to creating your own thing? Like, if you can't beat them, join them, try and get, so some money and some free supplements, and just put your name as like you're the bobblehead, the avatar for this company, as opposed to making your own, because it seems like it's like an impossible sea to navigate unless you have loads of people and loads of backing.
Well, see, it all depends on the mentality. And I don't think he'll mind me saying this. Bob Ciccarello is called the voice of bodybuilding. He's acquired the rights to sell Black Skull USA in America. And Bob had sent me his stuff, and he had this full breadth of products he was going to launch, and 3 SKUs with 5 different flavors, right? And he was going to have like 20 SKUs in the marketplace at launch. And it's like, look, if you like the formula, have 1 flavor, then you can. So entry into market, be 500 bottles is all you really have to produce. But if you're doing 5 flavors, now you're up to 20,000 bottles in one category, in one SKU, but just different flavors. Well, I had 5 different flavors. Snickers had 1 flavor for 55 years until our industry launches bars. And then what happened in our industry, if Europa didn't, if Detour Bar had 1 flavor and I'd bought all the Detour bars I could buy, well, Detour's not going to sell me any more bars. So Detour goes, let's launch a second flavor. Europa's got to buy it. So they'd launch a second flavor. We'd have to buy just as many. Now they're selling me 2 flavors. And then when I loaded up on that second flavor, guess what they did? They launched a 3rd flavor and a 4th flavor and a 5th. I can remember at one time, I think Quest had 25 flavors out there. Jacko Wacket Bang had probably 35 different flavors of energy drinks. And our industry caused this massive turn because they needed to increase revenue and they didn't have the mass appeal like a Coke or a Snickers. Snickers held off for as long as they could with 1 flavor bar, as long as they could. And then people started demanding different flavors, and then they had to move into the flavor world. If you're going to launch a brand, and look, I will tell any influencer, if you have 100,000 followers, sell to those 100,000 followers. If you sell 2% to the 100,000 followers, and you can do that every month at retail, you can make more money than you will as a sponsor. Because what happens at the, you see where an athlete gives you their discount code, right?
Yeah.
Well, you give their discount code, you come and buy directly from me. Well, now I own the guy you just gave your discount code to. So guess what? I'm sending him sales on the backside. He'll never use your discount code again because I'm giving better options for him. But the influencer gets free supplements probably, right? And they're trying, but it looks good on their page. Use my discount code. But the brands are really just trying to get the business direct. And it's not, I mean, if you use the discount code, I would tell any young guy who's got a good following, make a couple of hero SKUs, make 1 or 2, promote the devil out of that. If it's a pre-workout, how this pre-workout, because they're not going to care if you have a whey protein. They're not going to care if you have an amino acid. But if this is what made you big, promote it. Because nobody, again, very few people are promoting full families of brands. They may go to um, to any of they may go to Rise and have three of Rise's top SKUs, but then they're promoting somebody else. So if you're going to promote somebody else, at least have that one revenue stream that is a higher revenue stream. At least for you. I mean, even at Europa, we had products that had great margins, and we had products that had rotten margins, and we tried to blend them to be an affordable or a profitable situation for Europa. But some things, if you continue to promote somebody else, the somebody else wins. But if you don't have a good following and you want free products, by all means, go to First Form, go up to Andy and say, hey guys, I want to be an ambassador. And that way you build your own business.
Do you think that this is the way things are going to be going over the next 5 to 10 years because more people are taking this entrepreneurial approach? They have several different social media streams. Do you think that's how supplement companies are going to work, and that's how the sports nutrition industry will work?
Well, they're kind of already doing it. They're white labeling, like the manufacturers will just white label a product. You come in, and to run a label anymore is nothing. You used to have to run, in the early days, you had to run 20,000 labels. Now, a lot of these manufacturers have label machines in their office. If you want 3,000 bottles, they'll run you 3,000 bottles. I know in the printing world for clothing now, you used to have to buy, 100 larges, 100 mediums, or you had to buy hundreds. Now what you do is you have them go to a website and you can send them any JPEG image. They can pick from 40 JPEG images, pick the t-shirt, they print on demand. So it may cost you $5 more a t-shirt, but you're not throwing away any t-shirts or donating them to Goodwill. If they buy it, they sell it. And in people don't really care about walking in. I still laugh because people say, no, they want to go touch it. Amazon shows up to my house. Boxes show up to my house every day, and my wife doesn't touch it until it comes out of that box. So I think people are even at that level are okay. And if I was a guy starting a supplement brand, wouldn't I wouldn't take all 3,000 of those bottles and bring them to my home and try to ship them out. I would go to like a Europa who's only shipping for you. They charge like $10 a month per pallet to store it, and then they charge you to pick and pack it. You can't do that. I mean, these individuals think they're going to bring it to their garage. They're going to tape these boxes together. By the time you buy the tape, buy the box, and buy the packing material, take your time. Pay shipping, which you're going to pay an enormous rate for shipping, not cost effective for anybody starting a brand. Find a 3PL like what Europa does, or any 3PL that will ship it for you. You never touch the product. It goes through your Shopify. They send the product out, and that's how it works. It's so simple in today's world. So easy.
Oh, it's great to hear.
Yeah.
Like I had no idea how any of this had gone over the past 20, 30, 40 years, and to see like where the direction's heading. And it's exciting to see like where it will continue to go, because even over my 15 years of sort of being involved with this, I've seen some huge changes, but I don't know. And even like when I used to work at gyms, they would always come in, different supplement companies, and be like, hey, do you want some free Redcon, or do you want some free Bangs, or do you want some free this or that? And they were just trying to give us free stuff to just market their brand. And that was always really exciting to be a part of and just see where the industry goes and if those companies last or not.
Well, and we are an industry of Me Too, right? So we're knockoff. It's like if you get a creative idea, more than likely before that product lands, there's 5 or 6 more companies that have knocked you off. Because since Deshay changed the rule that said anything, and I think the year was 85, anything that came out before 85 doesn't have to be proven. Anything that comes out after 1985 has to have scientific research done on it to prove it. So everything we're making today has been out since 1985. You may mix it up different, but there's no brand new ingredient. You may call it something different, but there's nothing really new out there. So all we're doing is just mixing different garbage into the same garbage pail. And it's so nobody has to be really creative, except for you get the guys like Ed Bird that really do find something that's been around for creatine's been around forever. But they found out the benefits of creatine. I laugh when I talk about Dave Jenkins, who owned Next Nutrition. He brought out designer whey protein. Auto manufacturers, people used to pull up with trucks. They would give them the whey. The farmers would take it out and spray it in their fields for fertilizer. They gave it away for free. And then one day they found out that whey protein has this wondrous protein effect to it. And it was like when the one day that airlines didn't charge for luggage, and then the very next day you had to pay $25 a bag. It was revenue streams that came in big time because they were giving it away and throwing it away. And I think when you get guys like a Dan Duchesne who finds something new, he can capitalize on it for a short period of time as long as he doesn't really let it out there. But you can't market, can't sell if you don't market. And because there's nothing really new and inventive of these ingredients, other companies find out and they can launch it sometimes faster. I remember Muscle Tech used to launch a product 120 days before it would come out. And I'm like, man, you are giving your competitors such a jump start. And look, I can remember when Bill Phillips sent one of his guys to our booth at the Arnold to tell me he was cutting us off of EAS. And I called Mike Pickett, who owned Champion Nutrition, and I said, Mike, I need a knockoff to Myoplex. In a week, I had the formula. In 2 weeks, I had samples. In 3 weeks, I had product on my shelf. In 3 weeks. And, you know, and that was Metrex Myoplex days. But it was 3 weeks to have a product from an idea to on my shelf. Yeah.
That's a
So,
fast turnaround. I had
yeah,
no idea like what that was, what that looked like.
yeah. Yeah. Well, now you got to remember, like, if you're a manufacturer of, let's say, BCAAs, right? You're making 20,000 bottles and sticking them on a shelf. You know, Eric Hillman may have Big E supplements. I call you and say, hey, I need 100 of them. You just pull a bottle, or 144. You just pull them off, stick them in the line, send it through a label or put them back in the box and ship them to you. And now you have 144 boxes, and it was a day turnaround because the
That's
manufacturers are already pre-making. And again, all the EAAs are the same. All the BCAAs, all the creatine is the same. So all they're doing is they're just pre-making all these bottles, and you get the same bottle most of the time. I mean, most of the competitors' bottles look alike. So, but but there are some that do their own manufacturing that can put different things in it. But for the most part, a lot of these, and I say the bottom half of the 63,000, right? Even the middle down, they're just buying them off a shelf somewhere and just relabeling it.
really
Mm-hmm. Yeah, most of your influence are just relabeling from a manufacturer that's got product already up on the shelf. Yeah,
these are good to know. Yeah, so it's really, as you said, circling back to that point, is that you're really just buying into the bobblehead, and like you're buying into like the person, the brand, and going back to our initial conversation about Muscle Farm, like I thought it tasted really, really good, and I love the green and black duo so much so that like I still have a jug down in my kitchen on the countertop because I like to look at it. It just looks
yeah.
cool. So I put other protein inside of it, so I keep the Muscle Farm jug. It's yeah.
Well, I told you we were talking earlier. One of the things that I was able to do as CEO was really whatever I wanted, right? So I made a 200-pound barrel of combat whey protein, and it's a big black barrel. I have in my gym. I have two bathrooms. I put the sink on top of the barrel, and those are my sinks in both my bathrooms. But the label is an actual label for a 200-pound barrel of protein. Like there's 23,000 grams of protein in the bottle. That's all listed on the label. People comment more on having that in my gym than the power squat machine I have. It's amazing. But the Muscle Farm logo and design it was cool, and it was a fun brand to be a part of. Look, there's probably 15 brands in our industry, that I would love to be a part of. I just think that they had that cool of a concept. And fortunately, I still have stuff from Muscle Farm when they first came out and first launched, and I was friends with the two original owners. So I felt like I had a little place in that history. But fortunately, I was able to take it through the bankruptcy and sell it, and it's still surviving. So, I mean, thank God I didn't kill it. It'd have been worse on me if I'd have killed it. But we did sell it. So, and we were able to create sales, pick up a new customer base. And you know what? We brought some of the old customer base who had left Muscle Farm for so long, um, because of the drama at Muscle Farm, didn't have product. Some of the accusations that they were tainting the proteins because they wouldn't do the testing. Um, we brought all that back, and it did bring a consumer back. We got re-engagement back on the social media sites that they hadn't seen for a while. Um, so yeah, it was kind of nice to be able to take what I've done 40 years and at least help a company get through something.
That's great.
Yes.
What do you have in store next for you?
I don't know. Well, I'm running this gym. Um, I've been I've been offered a position in the movie industry, um, to look at maybe going to work for uh, a company in the movie industry. So I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. I do work with a few smaller supplement companies, trying to guide them on where to buy ingredients, where to buy product. Um, where to I mean, I helped a company last week try to find gum, but fortunately I know a few gum manufacturers along the way. So I'm fortunate that people still call me and ask me for my opinion of stuff. So yeah, I think, and I was on Bang Energy. I was on their board of directors for 2 years, going through that bankruptcy, which was, man, I, I learned more about business in that Bang, being on that Bang board, that when I'd go back and talk to the Muscle Farm board, I seemed like this genius of business, because I knew all the legal terms that these guys were shouting back and forth at each other. But I learned a lot about big business, and Europa was big. I mean, we were slated. If 20 hadn't have hit like it did, we would have been well over $350 million in business, which in our industry was bigger than almost every supplement company. Um, but I didn't consider us big. And I remember uh, Elizabeth Hasselback and I and a couple of others co-owned Elizabeth's brand called Noji, and it was a gluten-free bar. And I can just remember us talking to UNFI and Whole Foods, and UNFI goes, "Well, isn't Europa a competitor?" And the guy who ran that specialty brands division is talking to me. He goes, "Look, I've been in a lot of board meetings, and you may consider Europa a competitor. They don't consider you a competitor at all." I mean, they were big business to me was the $5 billion, $2 billion, $1 billion. We were just this little distributor who just got really fortunate that we had something in common with everybody we dealt with, and people trusted us. So, and we just did good business, and um, I just see that when you go through those routes and people still kind of trust, what I'm doing, it's kind of nice. So I don't know what the next level is. I'm probably just going to still help these little small companies that want some kind of advice on where to buy stuff.
That's great. How do you like owning a gym? Is that more
So
of a passion for you? It's a first love for you to do that?
it really is my first love. I mean, I owned gyms in the 90s. My first powerhouse was in the early 80s. That's where I met the Davish family. Um, we just became family. I mean, they brought me into their circle. Um, Will and Norm and Crystal. Uh, Will was the NPC chairman for Michigan. He used to bring me up to judges shows, and I just fell in love with that gym. And I was a power lifter. I was a hardcore 320-pound musclehead who just lived and breathed working out. And the supplements were kind of like a side road that I took when I sold my gym. I was offered to go to Pittsburgh with this Piedmont with American or U.S. Airlines, and I'm like, man, I'm not moving there. I was offered a few other marketing jobs, and then this little supplement company. And I have to laugh. My dad's brother sold Amway, and when I told my dad that I was going to go sell these vitamins, my dad thought I was going to be like an Amway sales guy. He told people, and my dad was proud of me. My dad was never not proud of me. He told people for a year when they said, "Oh, what does your son do?" Because he works for the airline. I'm like, "Dad, I sell." But he just envisioned back in that time that if you sold supplements, you were a door-to-door salesman, and really, that's what it was because no one in our industry had ever thought about selling to gyms. But because I sold in my gym, I understood how that revenue would help me out, and that just catapulted. When we opened our first distribution center in Fresno, California, and I moved to Fresno '96. The whole West Coast had allowed these health food stores to open up beside gyms, and the gyms were losing all this revenue. And I'm like, man, I feel like I'm starting over, calling these gyms, going, why are you letting the store take business out of your pocket? And so it really was. It was just a whole emergence of trying to get gym owners to understand to make incremental revenue. But then as the gym ideas changed, the planets came in, the crunches came in, it was really just about mass selling, get as many people in. All you cared about was the draft, not the sale. So selling supplements, when you're selling 10,000 memberships, you have 10,000 members drafting every month. Last thing you're going to worry about is a $1.99 energy drink sale. So, or carry, now some did, but as the whole, most of the 35,000 gyms didn't carry, they carried bars and drinks, but that was about it. It was really tough to make a living at a gym if you just did bars and drinks. So, but
Yeah,
they did work their memberships off of those drafts.
yeah, I can't imagine. I was coming out of the gym yesterday, and I was chatting with someone about like why so many of these big commercial gyms try and push like personal training packages, because you can have several thousand members all paying 10, 20, $30 a month, but a lot of them never come. So it's like, okay, we'll just, you know, bill your credit card and it's like fine. But like if you're charging someone maybe $1,000 a week or $2,000 every couple of weeks with personal training, that's going to outweigh the cost of like just like another gym kid coming in or you buying $1 water bottle or whatever it is. So it's definitely gonna be hard to turn a profit with a gym, but that's always one of those interesting things for like another fellow gym rat of being like, oh, hey, how do you go and do that? It'd be like a long-term goal if I would love to be like a part-time gym owner and just have my own place and have a little safe haven for fellow gym rats. But how do you turn a profit on that?
Well, so it's harder when you try to go bigger, right? When you need 20,000 square feet, you're going to be up into unless you're in a warehouse, which is tucked back in nowhere where nobody lives. But if you're in a community where there's a lot and you need 10 to 15 to 20,000 square feet, you're paying $25, $30 a square foot. My gym is 3,700 square feet, private. You have to have a key fob to get in. I limit my memberships at 125. You get free energy. You get free supplements, not the bottles. You get free scoops, and everybody can take an energy drink a day. I don't allow dailies. You can't call and come and say, "Hey, can I get a daily workout in?" It is a private club, and I, I'm going to say at the peak times between 5 a.m. and 7, there might be 10 people. Between 5 p.m. and 9 p.m., you might have 15 people. So when you come in, and it's packed, the gym is packed. It's got so much equipment, so many bars, so much free weight. But my overhead, and I do laugh, right? Because this is my retirement. I mean, it's my garage gym. I didn't build it for a revenue sustainer. I told people my accountant keeps telling me at some point it's got to stop looking like a hobby and actually has to look like a business. Um, but you can do at a small gym. You when I'm saying 3,700, I would have to add personal training. We don't do personal training. It's an open gym. You have to add um, personal training in because you need that additional revenue. I broke even no, I actually made money in January of this year. But then what I do is I go buy $1,000 bar or something stupid piece of equipment and just wipe out that $1,000. Um, But if it was really something that I was doing, it would be a struggle. And that's why you're seeing a lot of these group fitness places. Orange Theory is closed, a ton of them. The rent is just way too expensive. Even though you only need 3,000 square feet, you're paying 38 to 40 bucks a square foot because you need to be in high traffic areas. These smaller gyms just can't do it. So what ends up happening is you have to go to a Crunch or a Planet where you have to wait on equipment, or it's so packed you can't really get a good workout in. Or you got to figure out a time you can go where it's a legitimate time to go.
That drives me nuts, just as it probably drives millions of people nuts who like love the gym, and like I'll go twice a day, and I have gone twice a day since I was 15. And it's the best part of my day. And it's like I had belonged to Anytime Fitness for the longest time, but then they just jacked up their prices again. And I'm like, I'm not paying that much. But then I go to like a Planet or an LA, which is enormous, but it's so many people that it doesn't matter what time of day you go, it's always going to be packed.
Yeah. Yep. So I mean, it's what's your dollar worth, right? I mean, I'm $69. That's what my rates are a month, right? And some places $69. Even in Charlotte, I laugh because people won't join at 69. I am $20 more, no, $40 more expensive than Crunch, which is a mile down the street. $10 more a week, and people will go stand. This is what I laugh. My wife just busted on me the other day because we don't really have toll lanes here in Charlotte. But I was driving her car up, and I've got a toll pass, but her car doesn't. I was driving up to the car dealership, and I'm looking over to the right, and there's thousands of cars in the free lanes, and there's nobody in the $10 lane. It cost me $39 to go to the dealership and back home, and it took me 20 minutes. It would have taken me an hour, and I'm like, look, my time is worth a lot more, not because I can afford it, but if I look at sitting in that traffic, my anxiety level's going up. Not going to get where I need to go in time, but I got to pay a little bit more to go where nobody's at, and I can get there and I can get out. Yeah, all day long. I mean, that's how I visualize the economy and how I visualize my revenue. I'm not going to be in that non-toll paying traffic sitting in my car when I can be doing 70 and getting in and getting out. And I view that as people who will go to, and look, I think Crunch has great gyms. I think their gyms are phenomenal. Just too busy, too busy. I mean, I had a member say he came in and joined. He said, Eric, I went to train legs. I walked around Crunch twice, couldn't find an open piece of equipment, decided to train chest. Walked around once, couldn't find a piece of equipment, came down, knocked on my door, said, hey, can I get a tour? He toured, he joined. He said, I couldn't train two body parts. And he said, I'm good. So, yeah, I think you just have to find your niche. But I think in today's gym world, it's hard to be a small gym owner. I think it's just being capitalized by. And look, if they told me when the Crunch opened beside me, it had 7,500 members a day it opened. Even if you go at $10, you're making so much money, and most of theirs are like 19 bucks now. They're making just so much money. But I do think in areas there are gyms who are owned by individuals. I got a lot of great gym buddies that I have gym envy over. I mean, there's probably 1,000 gyms out there that I truly have gym envy of that do just a great job running the gym. It's tougher to open one today. The steel's more expensive. Dumbbells that used to be 65 cents, 50 cents a pound are now $2 a pound. And then you got to get old crappy ones. So you can't open a nice gym and not pay $2.50 a pound and then pay for shipping. So, and that's just on the dumbbells. So your overhead cost to open a gym is it's just so high.
Yeah, I remember buying dumbbells when I was in high school, and they were like 75 cents a pound at like our local Dick's Sporting Goods or Target. And I was like, yeah, so I got 10s through 35s. And then I wanted to get like 40s and 45s and keep building up. And I was like, after like the pandemic, everything just like skyrocketed in price.
Yeah.
And I am not letting those things go. Like my mom had asked me, like, hey, do you want to donate them to like the local kids so they can start weightlifting? I was like, no, that's going to go in my budding personal gym I'm currently making. Like,
Well, think about it. So one 100 pound dumbbell will cost you $250. One, got to have a pair. So you have $500 wrapped up in just a set of dumbbells, and that's at 100 pounds. I don't get it. I mean, I do get it. Everything's more expensive today, but yeah, I mean, supplements are easier to get into. Gym business is tough because now you have to sign 5-year leases, and then they're not giving you as much build out costs. The SBI loans, now you have a loan. You can lease the equipment, but now you have a lease on the equipment, and you got to pay yourself a salary. I mean, I don't think any entrepreneur, my business partner, are you back? Sorry about that.
Well, we can hop
um,
off soon too, because I
uh,
know we've been on for a while, but
yeah,
go ahead and finish this thought.
well,
Yeah.
yeah, but I mean, I forgot where I was going with it. Shoot,
Well,
I forgot
you
my
were
train
talking
of
about
thought.
like you had a gym buddy who like opened up a spot because you were talking about like the dumbbells being like
Yeah,
expensive.
well, I mean, it's one of those things where the supplement industry is so much easier to get into. The gym business is, like you said, post COVID, um, has just become really expensive.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to see where this is going to go. Are there any wrap up things that you wanted to add here? I mean, I can't thank you enough, Eric, for coming on. This was wonderful. I feel like I could just keep asking you questions and just keep taking your knowledge. I mean, you've been around this business for so long, and you're going to add a ton of value to people who listen to this. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. You know what I mean? At some point, the collegiate era of my life was great because it allowed me to implement things that I'd really implemented my whole life. But then the barriers I ran up against at that level. And when you talk about going to a collegiate level, it's all about winning. I mean, is what it is. It's all about winning games. If you lose games, alumni don't give you as much money. If you win games, alumni love dumping money in. And we gave them a way to make athletes, superhumans, and and now they kind of do this. They don't want to go to that next level, even though all the science is backing it. I mean, I've tried a couple of times to get back in with Appalachian, and they just kind of we've got it handled. And I'm like, okay. I mean, but I think we jump started something. Um, the D1 took to another level by bringing in dietitians, which I really do think help. But at some point, they have to come back to the science of food, and they have to come back to the science of supplements. Supplements, it's not to save all. Supplements are what they do. They supplement your food, and but what these athletes, and again, you're talking about college kids, so you have to have a mentor or a leader kind of hand guiding you. It's like you said, when they walked out of college, protein shake and a bag of food. We had vitamins lined up in cubbies, and each player had a name, and they had different supplements. We were giving them omega 3s during the winter because it was cold in Boone. We gave them D3 so they could get their vitamin D, and we had everything dialed in to what their body was lacking in order for them to win football games. And I think because there's not a lot of ISSN people getting into the collegiate world, and hopefully Jose will be able to change that with the ISN to get these guys, because I think with the science based on what sports nutrition can do, I think it will help their athletes sustain a longer life, life in a sport and life in general, and they're not going to be beat up in 10 years. And my hope is that some of these D1 colleges start to recognize that and bring people in with more supplement based, just not pretty food based.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that people like you are really kind of leading the charge there, like on that, because you've walked the walk and you talk the talk, and of course Jose Antonio and the ISSN do some amazing things, and I'm proud to go to their conferences and have one of their CISSN certifications because it's just
Yeah.
brilliant what's going on there, and yeah, it's going to change the state of the industry for the better and increase performance, and as we talked about, like just overall health and longevity, especially with like your mom who's 92 and has got a ton of energy, and I love to hear that.
Yeah, yeah, and it's really because she started drinking 2 muscle milks a day. That little bit changed her life completely. Yeah, because her demand for protein isn't that great anyway. So I mean, she just doesn't need it, but it's really jolted her.
I love to hear that.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, Eric, thank you very much for coming on. Where can people contact you if you would like to be contacted?
So I mean, they can go on. I've got Instagram. It's Big E Hillman, or they can go to Lenny Mac's gym. They can get me through there. I'm not that hard to find, so yeah, it's but they can contact me through there.
Oh, it's perfect. I'm going to be up in
Yeah.
Charlotte in a month or two for the marathon. I'll have to come up and
So you
say
got to
hi.
stop in. Yeah, you got to come into the gym and train. Yeah,
Awesome. Yeah,
yeah.
when this is all finished up and everything, I'll send you the episode. But yeah, thank you so much. This was awesome.
Good to go, Mike. Thank you, brother. Good talk to you.
Yeah, you too.
Yeah, good luck. Good luck in your